The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway hummed a merciless, sterile tune. Nora clutched a thin blanket, the flimsy cotton doing nothing to ward off the chill that had settled deep in her bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Her husband Blake had been gone for 6 hours. His last words, a distracted, "I'm just going to move the car," now echoed as a cruel joke. Her phone calls went straight to voicemail. Then came the final crushing blow. The admitting nurse approached her expression a mix of pity and professional duty. "Mrs. Evans," she began softly, "we're having a little trouble. The credit card on file was declined." That was it. The moment the world fell away, leaving Nora utterly alone, sick and abandoned in the sterile silence. She had no idea that her salvation and her revenge was just one floor above wearing a stethoscope and a name she hadn't dared to speak in years. Nora Evans lived a life that looked perfect from the outside. Her Instagram feed was a curated gallery of success, smiling selfies with her handsome husband Blake in front of their sleek minimalist downtown loft, photos of exquisite dinners at restaurants where reservations were a myth, weekend trips to wine country. She was by all accounts living the dream. But like the most beautiful apples, the rot was hidden deep inside. For the past year, the perfection had been a performance. Blake, once the charming, ambitious man who had swept her off her feet, had become a stranger. His affection had cooled, replaced by a constant low-grade irritation. He was a partner at a mid-level investment firm, a job that afforded them their lifestyle, but it was never enough. His conversations were peppered with bitter remarks about the old money boys, who got ahead without trying a thinly veiled jab at Nora's own family. Nora came from the Davenports. The name wasn't just known, it was etched onto university buildings and museum wings, but she had walked away from it all 5 years ago. Her parents, stern and unyielding, had disapproved of Blake. They saw him as an opportunist, a man dazzled by their wealth, not their daughter. Her older brother, Adrian, had been the most vocal. "He looks at you, Nora, but he sees a bank vault," he'd told her during a heated argument that had fractured their once close relationship. In a fit of youthful defiance and genuine love, or what she believed was love, she had chosen Blake. She had been cut off, not with malice, but with a cold corporate finality. Now the choice haunted her. Blake's frustration with her lack of a trust fund had curdled into resentment. Their loft felt less like a home, and more like a showroom he was forced to maintain. The final weeks were the worst. Nora had been feeling unwell for months, dizzy spells, blinding headaches, a persistent fatigue that felt like dragging an anchor. Blake dismissed it as stress or drama. "You should probably just take some yoga classes, Nora," he'd said one evening, not even looking up from his laptop, where he was tracking stock futures. "We can't afford a big medical bill right now. The market is volatile." The collapse came on a Tuesday. Nora was arranging a bouquet of lilies when a pain, sharp and electric, shot through her skull. The world tilted violently, the white petals of the flowers blurring into a smear. She managed to grab the edge of the kitchen island before her legs gave out a single crystal vase, shattering on the polished concrete floor. Blake found her there, 10 minutes later, his initial reaction one of pure annoyance. "Nora, what the hell?" "This is a mess." "Something's wrong," she managed to whisper, her vision swimming in and out of focus. "My head. I can't." He sighed, a sound heavy with theatrical burden. He helped her up, his touch impatient. The trip to the emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center, the city's most prestigious hospital, was a tense, silent affair. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't offer a single word of comfort. He just tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, his jaw tight, as if she had orchestrated this medical emergency purely to inconvenience him. In the ER, the flurry of activity was dizzying. Nurses asked questions she couldn't answer. A young doctor shone a light in her eyes and frowned. They wheeled her away for a CT scan, the rhythmic clunking of the gurney wheels, marking the most terrifying moments of her life. When they brought her back to the curtained-off bay, Blake was on his phone, his back to her. No, the deal has to close by Friday, he was saying in a low, urgent voice. Just liquidate the assets. I don't care about the penalty. He hung up when he saw her watching. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just work stuff, honey. You know how it is. A neurologist, a woman with kind but worried eyes, came to deliver the preliminary news. Mrs. Evans, we've found a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It appears to be from a ruptured aneurysm. It's very serious. We need to admit you immediately and prepare you for surgery. Surgery. The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. Nora looked at Blake, expecting to see fear, concern, anything. Instead, she saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, calculation. His gaze darted from the doctor to Nora, as if he were assessing a depreciating asset. Surgery. He repeated, his voice flat. Is that covered by our insurance? The doctor blinked, taken aback. Our primary concern is your wife's life, Mr. Evans. The financial department can discuss payment options with you. Right. Of course, Blake said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He leaned down and kissed Nora's forehead. His lips were cold. Don't you worry about a thing, honey. I'm going to go sort everything out. Paperwork, insurance, all that boring stuff. I'll just go move the car to the long-term garage first. Okay, Nora whispered, clinging to that small promise. Hurry back. He smiled again, a quick, empty flash of white teeth. I'll be right back. He walked out of the curtained bay, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Nora watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She didn't know it yet, but it was the last time she would ever see him as her husband. The performance was over. The first hour passed in a blur of medical jargon and preparation. Nurses came and went, drawing blood, checking her vitals, and prepping an IV line. Nora answered their questions in a fog, her mind fixed on the door, expecting Blake to walk through it at any moment. Every time the curtain swished open, her heart would leap only to plummet when it was just another hospital staffer. After 2 hours, the dread began to curdle into real fear. She fumbled for her phone on the small bedside table. His name, Blake, glowed on the screen. She pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked to voicemail. Hey, you've reached Blake. Leave a message. His voice was breezy, casual, a relic from a time when he still pretended to care. Blake, it's me, she said, her own voice trembling. They're talking about the surgery. I'm really scared. Please, where are you? Call me. She tried again, 10 minutes later. Straight to voicemail, and again. Voicemail. She sent a flurry of texts. Where are you, Blake? Please, I need you. They said the surgery is in the morning. Please come back. The blue bubbles of her messages remained there, stark and unanswered. No delivered confirmation. No read receipt. He had turned his phone off, or blocked her. Panic, cold and sharp, began to pierce through the fog of her illness. The excuses she had been making for him. He got stuck in traffic. His phone died. He was in a long line at the parking office, crumbled into dust. He wasn't coming back. The admitting nurse, a kind woman named Patty with greying hair and gentle hands, returned a little while later. Her professional smile was gone, replaced by an expression of deep, uncomfortable sympathy. "Mrs. Evans," she started, her voice low, "we need to finalize your admission, and we're having a little trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Nora asked, though she already knew. "The credit card on file, the one your husband provided, it was declined," Patty said, avoiding eye contact. "The pre-authorization for the surgical deposit didn't go through." The words hit Nora like a physical blow, knocking the last bit of air from her lungs. It wasn't just that he had left. He had deliberately and systematically cut her off. The joint credit card, their safety net, was empty. He had likely drained the account before he even walked out of the ER. "There must be a mistake," Nora stammered the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Try it again. It's a corporate card, maybe." Patty gave her a look that said she'd heard it all before. "We've tried it 3 times, honey, and the secondary card on your file, your personal debit, also came back with insufficient funds." Of course it did. Blake had siphoned every penny from their joint checking account weeks ago, claiming he was moving it into a high-yield investment vehicle. Her personal account held less than $200. She had given him everything: her independence, her family, her financial security. And he had taken it all and vanished. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and shameful. She was alone in a hospital facing brain surgery with not a penny to her name. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was staggering. He hadn't just left her. He had left her to die, buried under a mountain of medical debt. What happens now?" Nora whispered the question, hanging in the sterile air. "Ordinarily," Patty said, her voice laced with bureaucratic regret, "we would need to discuss transfer to a public county facility. For a procedure this complex without proof of ability to pay." She trailed off, letting the horrific implications sink in. A transfer could mean delays. A lower standard of care, a gamble Nora couldn't afford to take. Her life was hanging by a thread, and that thread was about to be cut by a billing department. Nora began to sob. Not loud, racking sobs, but a quiet, hopeless weeping that shook her entire body. She had made a terrible, life-altering mistake 5 years ago, and this was the price. She had traded a family who loved her for a man who saw her as a balance sheet, and now her account was zeroed out. Patty placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Let me go talk to my supervisor. Let's not panic just yet. We have a patient assistance program. There might be options." As Patty left, Nora stared at the acoustic tile ceiling, the tiny perforations blurring into a grey nothingness. She was adrift in the most profound loneliness she had ever known. She had no one to call. Her parents wouldn't take her call, even if she could bring herself to make it. Her friends were Blake's friends, a superficial circle of people who wouldn't be interested in her now that she was no longer part of a power couple. Then a name surfaced from the depths of her memory, a name she hadn't allowed herself to think about for years. Adrian, her brother. She didn't even know where he lived anymore, let alone his phone number. The last she'd heard through a stray bit of gossip was that he was doing some kind of medical research back east. He could be anywhere in the world. He was as good as gone, another ghost in her life of losses. The neurologist returned her face, etched with a new urgency. "Mrs. Evans, your latest scan shows the bleed is more significant than we thought. We can't delay the procedure. We need to get you into the OR. But the chief of neurosurgery, Dr. Davenport, wants to review your case himself before we proceed. He's on his way down." Nora barely registered the words. It was all just noise. All she could hear was the echo of Blake's footsteps walking away. Then the name the neurologist said finally pierced her consciousness. Davenport. It couldn't be. It was a common enough name. It had to be a coincidence, a cruel cosmic joke. She closed her eyes, praying she was wrong, praying for anyone but him to walk through that curtain. Because if it was him, she wasn't sure what would be worse, the abandonment by her husband or the humiliation of being found like this by the brother she had turned her back on. The swish of the curtain was different this time. It was pulled back with a crisp, authoritative motion. A team of people entered, but Nora's eyes were fixed on the man in the lead. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader under a pristine white doctor's coat. His dark hair was shorter, flecked with distinguished hints of silver at the temples. But the eyes, the same intense, piercing blue eyes that could be warm with laughter or cold with judgment, were unmistakable. It was Adrian. He stopped at the foot of her bed, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in the hospital gown, the IV line, the pale, tear-streaked face. His expression was a mask of unreadable professionalism. He held a tablet, his eyes scanning the data on the screen before they settled back on her. The neurologist and nurses around him seemed to hold their breath, waiting for him to speak. "Mrs. Evans," he said, his voice deep and formal. The name felt like a slap. He knew exactly who she was. "I'm Dr. Adrian Davenport, the chief of neurosurgery here at St. Jude's. I've been reviewing your case." Nora's throat was dry. She couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, a ghost from her past, resurrected in the sterile, unforgiving present. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was his hospital. He wasn't just a doctor. He was the doctor, the one who held her life in his hands. "The subarachnoid hemorrhage is severe." He continued, his tone clinical as if he were discussing a stranger. "Given the location of the aneurysm, a standard clipping is high risk. I'll be performing an endovascular coiling. It's less invasive and the recovery time will be faster." He looked at the neurologist. "Book or3 for 7 a.m. I want a full pre-op workup done in the next hour. And move her to the neuro ICU private wing. I want her on one-to-one nursing." He then turned his gaze back to Nora, and for a fraction of a second, the professional mask slipped. She saw a flicker of something else, anger, pain, a deep, buried hurt. "Where is your husband?" he asked, the question sharp, precise like a scalpel. The dam of Nora's composure broke. A fresh wave of tears streamed down her face. He left." She choked out the shame burning her cheeks. "The credit card was declined. He's gone." A muscle twitched in Adrian's jaw. He said nothing for a long moment, the silence in the bay thick with years of unspoken words. The other staff members shuffled their feet, looking anywhere but at the raw, unfolding family drama. Finally, Adrian looked at Patty, the admitting nurse. "Is the billing issue what's been holding up her transfer to a proper room?" Patty nodded nervously. "Yes, doctor. Standard procedure. We couldn't secure payment authorization." Adrian's voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet. "This is St. Jude's Medical Center, not a collections agency, and this patient is my sister." The words landed with the force of a thunderclap. The nurses and the other doctor stared, their mouths agape. "Any and all costs associated with her care are to be billed directly to my personal account. Is that understood?" "Yes, Dr. Davenport. Immediately," Patty stammered, already backing out of the room. "Get her moved. Now," he commanded. Then he turned to the remaining staff. "Everyone out. I need a minute with the patient." The bay cleared in seconds, leaving Nora alone with her brother. The silence that followed was heavier than before. He walked over to the side of her bed, his formidable presence seeming to shrink the small space. He still hadn't looked at her with any real warmth. 5 years, Nora, he said, his voice low and tight with emotion. Not a word. Not a phone call. Not even when Mom was sick last year. The only way I find out you're not okay is when you show up in my ER with a ruptured blood vessel in your brain. Adrian, I'm so sorry. She whispered the words inadequate. I was ashamed. I was wrong. Yes, you were. He said the words blunt, but not entirely cruel. There was a deep well of pain behind them. I told you what he was. Dad's investigators vetted him. He was drowning in debt and looking for a life raft. You were his lottery ticket. When he realized there was no payout, he was just waiting for the right time to cash out what he could and disappear. His words were a confirmation of the oozly truth she had refused to see. Every dismissive comment from Blake, every complaint about money, every moment of coldness clicked into place. She hadn't been a wife to him. She had been a failed investment. Adrian's posture seemed to soften slightly, the rigid anger giving way to a weary sadness. He drained your joint accounts this afternoon. All of them. My financial guy flagged it an hour ago. He's also been having an affair for the last 8 months with a woman named Jenna Swanson. When Nora flinched as if he'd struck her, it was too much all at once. The abandonment, the theft, and now the infidelity. She felt herself begin to spiral, the room tilting again. Adrian saw the panic in her eyes. In an instant, the cold doctor and the angry brother vanished, replaced by the Adrian she remembered from their childhood. The one who would put a bandage on her scraped knee and chase away the monsters under her bed. He reached out and took her hand. His was warm and steady. Hey, look at me, he said, his voice suddenly gentle. None of that matters right now. Blake is garbage. We'll deal with him later. Right now, the only thing that matters is you. I'm the best at what I do, Nora. I promise you I will not let anything happen to you. Do you understand? She nodded, clinging to his hand like a lifeline. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel completely alone. Within minutes, orderlies arrived to move her. They wheeled her gurney out of the chaotic ER and into a series of quiet, hushed corridors, finally stopping outside a large, private room. It was less a hospital room and more a luxury hotel suite, with a sweeping view of the city lights, a comfortable sitting area, and state-of-the-art medical equipment discreetly integrated into the wall. You're safe now, Adrian said, as the nurses helped her get settled. Get some rest. I'll see you in the morning before the procedure. He turned to leave, but Nora called his name. Adrian. He stopped at the door. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. For everything. He gave a single, sharp nod. I'm your brother Nora. It's what I should have been doing all along. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Nora in the quiet, safe dark, the city lights twinkling below, like a promise of a new dawn. She was broken and betrayed, but she was no longer abandoned, and she had a feeling that Blake Evans had no idea what kind of storm was about to break over his head. The surgery was a success. Nora woke up in the neuro-ICU with a dull headache, but a mind that felt clearer than it had in months. The first face she saw was Adrian's. He was sitting in a chair by her bed, dressed in scrubs, his face etched with fatigue, but his blue eyes sharp and focused. Welcome back, sleepyhead, he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. The procedure went perfectly. The aneurysm is secured. No complications. Relief washed over Nora so intensely it left her weak. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected. "Now you just have to focus on recovering." The next few days were a cocoon of quiet healing. The one-to-one nursing Adrian had ordered meant she was never alone. The nurses were attentive and kind, treating her with a deference that she knew came directly from her brother's orders. Adrian visited several times a day, slipping easily between the roles of concerned brother and meticulous doctor, checking her neurological responses 1 minute and quizzing her on what trashy TV show she wanted to watch the next. In the quiet moments between medical checks, they began to talk. Really talk, for the first time in 5 years. They carefully navigated the minefield of their estrangement, apologizing for harsh words and years of stubborn silence. Nora learned that Adrian hadn't just become a doctor. He had built an empire. "After my residency, I got into biotech," he explained one afternoon, peeling an orange for her. "I developed a new type of biodegradable stent for neurological procedures. It got fast-tracked by the FDA. I founded a company, Davenport Diagnostics, to manufacture it. We went public 3 years ago." "So when people say billionaire, they're not exaggerating?" Nora asked, a little stunned. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the label. "It's just paper mostly. But it gives me resources. Resources I can use to fix things." He met her eyes, and she knew he wasn't talking about medicine anymore. "Speaking of which, there's someone I want you to meet when you're feeling up to it." 2 days later, a woman with a razor-sharp bob and an even sharper suit entered Nora's room. She carried a slim leather briefcase and radiated an aura of intimidating competence. "Nora, this is Helen Pierce," Adrian said. "She's the best family law and asset recovery attorney in the state. I've already given her the broad strokes." Ms. Pierce shook Nora's hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes assessing. "Mrs. Evans, first, I'm glad to see you're recovering well. Second, your brother has informed me of your husband's deplorable actions. My job is to ensure he doesn't get away with a single cent." Nora, still weak from her surgery, felt a surge of anxiety. "I don't know. A legal fight feels so overwhelming." "It won't be a fight, Miss," Pierce said, her voice cool and confident. "It will be a systematic dismantling. Adrian's financial team has already been at work. While you were in surgery, we were busy." She opened her briefcase and laid out a series of documents on the rolling bedside table. "Here's what we know. Blake Evans drained your joint accounts of approximately $187,000. He also liquidated a small stock portfolio you inherited from our grandmother, which your parents had set aside for you despite the estrangement. He forged your signature to do it. That's a felony." Nora felt sick. That portfolio was her only link to her grandmother, a loving woman who had always been on her side. He used the funds to put a down payment on a penthouse condominium under his name only. Ms. Pierce continued, her voice relentless. He also purchased a new Porsche and a diamond tennis bracelet. The bracelet we've confirmed was a gift for his mistress, Miss Jenna Swanson. While Nora was processing this, Adrian was observing the scene with a cold fury in his eyes. He had known Blake was a snake, but the sheer speed and audacity of his betrayal were still shocking. Meanwhile, 100 miles away, Blake and Jenna were living in their new ill-gotten paradise. They toasted champagne on the balcony of their penthouse, the city lights spread out below them. "To new beginnings," Blake said, clinking his glass against hers. "And to shedding dead weight." Jenna, a vapidly pretty woman with cold, hungry eyes, draped herself over him. "Are you sure she can't touch us? The hospital, the money? None of it can be traced back here." "I'm sure," Blake said with a smug grin. "I was meticulous. I used burner phones to arrange the move. The accounts were cleaned out and closed. As far as anyone knows, I'm a grieving husband who had a breakdown and left town. Nora is probably in some state-run facility right now. By the time she gets out, if she gets out, I'll have vanished." He felt a pang of something, but it wasn't guilt. It was the thrill of the escape. He had finally done it. He had cut the cord to the Davenports and their judgmental stares, and gotten away with a nice little severance package. He believed he was smart, untouchable. He had no idea that the full, terrifying weight of the Davenport name was about to come crashing down on him. Back in the hospital room, Ms. Pierce was outlining the first step. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, we will be filing an ex parte emergency motion," she explained to Nora. "We will request a temporary restraining order and a freeze on all of Blake's known assets, citing spousal abandonment, egregious financial misconduct, and risk of flight. The judge will see the hospital admission, the drained accounts, the forged signature. It will be granted without question." "What does that mean, a freeze?" Nora asked. Adrian answered, his voice hard as ice. "It means that tomorrow, when he tries to use his credit card to buy his morning coffee, it will be declined. When he tries to pay the movers for the new furniture, the check will bounce. Every dollar he stole will be locked away, just out of his reach. This is just the beginning, Nora. He wanted to leave you with nothing. We're going to make sure he achieves that goal for himself." Nora looked from her brother's determined face to the lawyer's confident smile. The fear and helplessness she had felt for so long began to recede, replaced by a flicker of something else strength. They hadn't just saved her life. They were giving her the power to take it back. The next morning, Blake Evans woke up feeling like the king of the world. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his new penthouse, glinting off the chrome and glass surfaces. Jenna was still asleep, a silk sheet tangled around her. He slipped out of bed, put on a plush robe, and walked to the high-tech espresso machine that had cost more than his first car. Today was the day he would finalize his new life. He had appointments to furnish the rest of the condo, and a celebratory dinner planned at the city's most exclusive new restaurant. He hummed to himself as the machine whirred, thinking of Nora, only for a fleeting moment. He pictured her in a drab, crowded hospital ward and felt a brief, satisfying sense of superiority. He had escaped. He was free. His first inkling that something was wrong came at the gourmet market downstairs. He had picked out organic coffee beans, imported cheese, and a bottle of expensive champagne. At the checkout, he tapped his premium black credit card on the reader. The machine beeped. "Declined," the cashier said flatly. Blake frowned. "That's impossible. Try it again." The cashier ran the card. "Declined again, sir. Insufficient funds." "Insufficient funds." Blake scoffed loud enough for the people behind him to hear. "That card has a 6-figure limit." He pulled another card from his wallet, one linked to his new checking account, where he had deposited the bulk of the cash. "Declined." A hot flush of embarrassment and anger crept up his neck. He stammered an excuse about his bank's fraud protection and left the items on the counter, storming out of the market. In the elevator, he frantically pulled up his banking app. What he saw made his blood run cold. Every single one of his accounts, checking, savings, investment, was plastered with a bright red banner. account frozen by court order. His balance was inaccessible. He had over $100,000 in cash and assets, and he couldn't access a single penny of it. Panic set in. A court order. How Nora was sick in a hospital bed, helpless. She couldn't have done this. Had her family finally stepped in? He had always assumed they had written her off completely. He raced back up to the penthouse. Jenna was awake, scrolling through her phone. "Hey, honey, I was thinking we should get that Roche Beaubois sofa today, the white leather one." "We have a problem," Blake said, his voice tight. "A big one." He explained the situation. Jenna's perfectly made-up face went from serene to panicked. "What do you mean frozen?" she demanded. "What about the furniture, my shopping trip? You promised me a Cartier watch." "Forget the watch, Jenna," Blake snapped. "This is serious. Someone is coming after me." His first thought was to call his lawyer a slick corporate attorney who was better at drafting contracts than dealing with aggressive litigation. The lawyer listened and then gave him the grim news. An ex parte freeze is hard to get, Blake. The plaintiff had to show overwhelming evidence of fraud or risk of flight. A judge signed off on this, which means they have proof you were trying to hide assets. And because it's an emergency order, you can't touch anything until a hearing which could be weeks away. Blake's world was shrinking with terrifying speed. He had no cash. His credit was frozen. The life he had stolen was now a prison he couldn't afford. Desperate, he decided to do the one thing he thought he'd never have to do again: contact Nora. He assumed she was weak, alone, and probably terrified. He could manipulate her, convince her this was all a misunderstanding, get her to call off her dogs. He dialed her number, the one he had blocked just days ago. It rang. He felt a surge of relief. She hadn't blocked him. But the voice that answered was not Nora's. It was a man's voice, calm, deep, and laced with Arctic cold. "This is Dr. Davenport. To whom am I speaking?" Blake froze. Davenport. It couldn't be. He stammered, I'm trying to reach Nora Evans. My wife." There was a pause on the other end of the line, pregnant with menace. "She is no longer your wife, in any meaningful sense of the word, Mr. Evans. She is my patient, and my sister." The bottom fell out of Blake's stomach. Adrian Davenport, the brilliant, overprotective older brother, the one Nora had whispered about in the early days of their relationship, the one who had apparently become some kind of medical superstar. He hadn't just stumbled into any hospital. He had delivered his victim directly to her guardian angel. "My sister is recovering from the emergency brain surgery she required after you abandoned her." Adrian continued, his voice dangerously level. "I'm handling all her affairs. Any communication you wish to have will go through her attorney, Ms. Helen Pierce. I suggest you find a very good lawyer of your own. You're going to need one." Before Blake could respond, Adrian hung up. Blake stood in the sun-drenched penthouse, the phone trembling in his hand. He was no longer the brilliant escape artist. He was a cornered rat. And he had just realized the trap he'd walked into wasn't set by Nora. It was set by the Davenports. And their resources were limitless. In her hospital room, Nora had listened to Adrian's side of the conversation. He put the phone down and looked at her. "He's scared," Adrian said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. He thought he was punching down. He just found out he picked a fight with a heavyweight. Nora felt a strange sense of detachment. She didn't feel vengeful joy, but a quiet, firm sense of justice. She had been a victim. Now she was a survivor. "What's the next step, Ms. Pierce?" she asked the lawyer, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room. Miss Pierce smiled a predator's smile. The freeze was the opening jab, my dear. Now we start breaking him down. We have the forgery charge. We have evidence of embezzlement from his own firm that Adrian's investigators uncovered. We are going to file for divorce on grounds of abandonment, adultery, and attempted fraud. We will not be asking for a settlement. We will be demanding total asset forfeiture. We are going to leave him with nothing but his own debts and a potential prison sentence. The king had been checkmated in the opening moves of the game, and his castle was about to come tumbling down. The asset freeze was just the first domino to fall. The Davenport machine, once activated, was ruthlessly efficient. While Nora focused on her physical therapy, learning to walk the hospital corridors with renewed strength, Adrian and Helen Pierce orchestrated Blake's complete and total downfall. The second blow came from his own workplace. An anonymous, meticulously detailed file was couriered to the managing partner and the board of directors at Blake's investment firm, Paradigm Capital. The file contained irrefutable proof gathered by Adrian's high-priced forensic accountants that Blake had been skimming from client accounts for over a year. He had been creating ghost invoices and rerouting small percentages of management fees into a personal offshore account, the one account the court order hadn't yet touched. The board convened an emergency meeting. Blake, already panicked and unable to access his funds, was summoned. He walked into the gleaming boardroom, his usual arrogance replaced by a sweaty, desperate pallor. His partner's men, he had golfed and drank with, looked at him with cold disappointment. "Blake, we've received some disturbing information." His boss, a man named Robert, said, pushing the file across the mahogany table. "Embezzlement. Fraud. Can you explain this?" Blake's mind raced. He tried to lie, to deflect, to blame a junior analyst, but the evidence was too precise, the paper trail too clean. They had transaction numbers, dates, routing codes. He had been caught red-handed. He was fired on the spot, escorted out of the building by security, with his belongings in a cardboard box, his photo and credentials immediately deactivated. As a final humiliation, the firm announced they would be cooperating fully with a federal investigation. The news hit the financial district like a shockwave. Blake Evans, the rising star, was a common thief. His professional reputation was instantly incinerated. The third blow was personal. Jenna, who had stuck by him for a few days, fueled by a misguided belief that he could somehow fix things, began to see the writing on the wall. The penthouse they were living in was part of Blake's frozen assets. An eviction notice was served. The Porsche was repossessed in the middle of the night. Her new tennis bracelet, which Ms. Pierce had flagged as a fraudulent conveyance of marital assets, was subject to seizure. Her loyalty, as it turned out, was only as deep as Blake's wallet. "I can't do this, Blake," she shrieked at him in the half-empty penthouse, surrounded by moving boxes they couldn't afford to have moved. "My life is being ruined. I'm being named in lawsuits. I thought you were a winner, not some common criminal who gets caught. I did this for us." He pleaded, his desperation pathetic. "No, you did this for you," she spat back. "I'm done." She packed her designer bags and left, hailing a taxi and disappearing from his life as quickly as she had entered it, leaving him alone in the monument to his own greed. While Blake's world imploded, Nora's was being carefully rebuilt. Her physical recovery was swift. With the pressure of Blake and their toxic marriage gone, she felt lighter, more herself than she had in years. Adrian was a constant supportive presence. He brought her art books from the hospital gift shop, remembering her long-abandoned passion for painting. One evening, as they sat in her room watching the sunset, he turned to her. "Mum and Dad know what happened," he said quietly. "They've been calling me every day. They're ashamed of how they handled things. They want to see you, Nora, whenever you're ready. Nora felt a complex mix of emotions. Years of hurt and resentment warred with a deep-seated longing for her family. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "You don't have to," Adrian said immediately. "This is on your terms, all of it, but they love you. They were just afraid for you, and it turns out they were right to be." A few days later, her parents, William and Catherine Davenport, walked hesitantly into her hospital room. They looked older than she remembered, their stern faces softened by worry and regret. Her mother's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Nora. "Oh, my darling girl," Catherine whispered, rushing to her side and taking her hand. "Can you ever forgive us?" The reunion was painful, emotional, but ultimately healing. The years of silence melted away in a flood of apologies and tears. They hadn't approved of Blake, but they had never stopped loving her. They had simply been waiting for her to come home. The final piece of Blake's destruction was delivered by Ms. Pierce. She scheduled a settlement conference, which Blake was forced to attend, with a court-appointed lawyer he couldn't afford to pay. He arrived looking gaunt and broken. Nora chose not to be there. Adrian and Ms. Pierce represented her interests. The meeting was short. "Here is our offer," Ms. Pierce said, sliding a single piece of paper across the table. "Ms. Davenport." She made a point of using Nora's maiden name, "will agree not to pursue private civil charges for the forgery and theft. In exchange, you will sign over any and all remaining claims to marital property. You will forfeit the full contents of your offshore account, which we have already located, and you will agree that your share of the marital debt includes the full unsubsidized cost of Nora's medical treatment. The divorce will be finalized immediately." Blake's lawyer looked at the paper and then at Blake. "It's not a settlement," he muttered. "It's a surrender." "He can take it," Adrian said, his voice like stone. "Or my sister can testify at his federal fraud trial. If she does, he won't see the outside of a prison for a decade. The choice is his." Blake looked up, his eyes meeting Adrian's for the first time. He saw no pity, no mercy, only the cold, hard finality of justice. He had gambled and lost everything. Defeated, he picked up the pen and signed his name, surrendering the last vestiges of the life he had stolen. He walked out of the conference room, a free man, but a man with absolutely nothing. No job, no money, no home, and a looming federal indictment. He was exactly where he had tried to leave Nora alone, and with nothing. Blake couldn't let it go. In his mind, twisted by narcissism and rage, he was the victim. He had been cheated, tricked by the powerful Davenports. One final desperate act of confrontation was all he had left. He found out Nora was being discharged from the hospital and decided to intercept her, to force her to see him, to unleash the torrent of bitterness that was poisoning him from the inside out. He waited in the main lobby of the hospital, his appearance a shocking contrast to the suave man he once was. His suit was rumpled, his face was unshaven, and his eyes were wound with a frantic energy. When he saw her, his breath caught. Nora was being pushed in a wheelchair as a precaution, but she looked radiant. She was dressed not in a hospital gown, but in an elegant cashmere sweater and slacks. Her parents were flanking her, and Adrian was behind, carrying her bag. They looked like what they were, a family, strong and united. "Nora!" he shouted, striding towards them, causing heads to turn. Adrian stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Blake and his sister. "That's far enough, Blake." "I need to talk to my wife," Blake yelled, his voice cracking. "You don't have a wife," Adrian said calmly. "You signed the papers. It's over." "You did this," Blake snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Adrian. "You and your money, you destroyed me." It was Nora who answered. Her voice, though quiet, was steady and clear, imbued with a strength he had never heard before. "No, Blake. You destroyed yourself. You made your choices. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to leave me when you thought I was dying. This isn't about Adrian's money. This is about your character, or rather the lack of it." He stared at her, stunned into silence by her directness. The weak, accommodating woman he had married was gone. In her place was a Davenport with a spine of steel. "You left me with nothing," he finally whispered, his rage collapsing into self-pity. "And now you know how it feels," Nora replied, her eyes holding no hatred, only a distant, final pity. "The difference is I have people who love me. What do you have?" That was the final blow. He had nothing and no one. Before he could say another word, hospital security, alerted by Adrian, arrived and escorted a non-protesting, utterly defeated Blake Evans from the building. Nora watched him go, not with triumph, but with a profound sense of closure. That chapter of her life was finally, truly over. 6 months later, the city's art scene was buzzing about a new gallery opening in the chic arts district. The gallery was called Phoenix, and it was dedicated to showcasing emerging local artists. The works on display were vibrant, powerful, and full of life. The owner and curator of the gallery stood near the entrance greeting guests. It was Nora Davenport. She had not only recovered, but she had thrived. Using the money from her divorce settlement, every penny of which Miss Pierce had clawed back, she had rediscovered her passion. The first painting that had sold that night was one of her own, a stunning abstract piece titled Subarachnoid Hemorrhage, a chaotic but beautiful swirl of crimson black and brilliant gold. Adrian was there, beaming with pride, a glass of champagne in his hand. Their parents were mingling with the crowd, telling anyone who would listen how brilliant their daughter was. "I never thought I'd feel this happy again," Nora confessed to Adrian in a quiet moment. "This was always who you were," he told her, squeezing her shoulder. "You just got lost for a little while. Welcome home." Her phone buzzed with a news alert from a financial journal. The headline read, "Former investment partner Blake Evans sentenced to 36 months in federal prison for fraud." She glanced at it, felt a flicker of a distant memory, and then deleted the notification without a second thought. He was a part of her past, and her future was a bright, empty canvas waiting for her to paint it. A young artist came up to her, her eyes shining. "Ms. Davenport, thank you so much for this opportunity. You've given me my start." Nora smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "Please," she said, "call me Nora." She was no longer just a survivor. She was a creator, a benefactor, a woman standing on her own 2 feet, building a new life not from the ashes of her old one, but from the strength she had found within herself. The cage was broken, and the phoenix had finally taken flight. Nora's journey shows us that the deepest betrayals can sometimes lead to the most profound rediscoveries of self. She was left alone in her darkest hour by the one person who vowed to protect her, only to be saved by the family she thought she had lost forever. Her story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to resilience, the strength of true family bonds, and the incredible power that comes from taking back your own narrative. Blake thought he was closing a chapter, but he only forced Nora to start a new, more beautiful book. If you were moved by Nora's story of turning betrayal into triumph, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more incredible stories of justice and empowerment, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. What did you think of Adrian's master plan? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.